For filing GSTR2, receiver taxpayers are required to take actions on the auto-populated invoices that they receive in their GSTR2. This video will walk you through the steps of taking actions on these invoices. Once you receive invoices in your GSTR2 from various suppliers, you need to take one of the following 4 actions on them. 1. Accept the invoice if the provided information appears to be correct. 2. Reject if you see an invoice with totally incorrect details or if the supplier has uploaded a wrong invoice. 3. Edit the auto-populated details of an invoice in case the furnished information has errors. And 4. Keep the invoice pending so that it could be rolled over to the next month's GSTR2. In addition to this, if the supplier taxpayer has missed any invoice, the receiver taxpayer can add it to his GSTR2. To help you understand these functionalities in a better way, let us follow through an example. Assuming that my supplier has issued me 5 invoices during the current tax period, I need to take actions on them in my GSTR2. To begin, I will log into the GST portal and navigate to the Returns dashboard. On the File Returns page, select the financial year and return filing period, which is the month for which you wish to view or file the return. Let us assume that my current tax period is September 2017. Once done, click Search to view your returns dashboard for the specified filing period. The title that says Inward Supplies Received by Taxpayer GSTR2 contains your auto-populated GSTR2. Go ahead and click either its header block or the button Prepare Online. In the GSTR2 Invoice Details block, the first tile 4A Inward Supplies Received from Registered Person including reverse charge supplies is a combination of sections 3 and 4A. Since this section is exclusively for B2B supplies, clicking the header block of this tile will take you to the Suppliers Details page, which shows the GSTIN of your suppliers, corresponding to other details such as number of invoices that have been successfully saved after processing, total taxable value, tax paid, and input tax credit or ITC availed. The figures are showing zeros since I have not saved any invoices yet. ITC for each invoice can be availed at the time of accepting it in GSTR2, which we will show you in a moment. Clicking the GSTIN of the supplier will open the B2B invoice summary page showing 2 sections, uploaded by supplier and uploaded by taxpayer. The first one is selected by default, containing 4 invoices with status as no action taken. Please note that the receiver taxpayer must take action on all the invoices that appear on this page. If any invoice is left with the status of no action taken while proceeding with the submission, the GST portal will throw an error and you will not be able to submit GSTR2. As I mentioned earlier, the supplier had issued me 5 invoices and it seems that he forgot to include one of those invoices. As we proceed, we will take actions on these 4 invoices listed here and then add the 5th invoice by using the Add Missing Invoice option. I'll start with first invoice that has the total value of 45,000 rupees. To view its details, click the Edit button under the Actions column. The invoice will open in edit mode where the system will allow you to change its certain fields. The fields such as supplier's GSTIN, supplier's name, invoice number, invoice date, place of supply, supply type, invoice type, and supply attract reverse charge cannot be changed. You can only change the total invoice value and item details, such as the figures of tax rates, taxable values, amounts of tax, eligibility for ITC, and avail ITC accordingly. You may select the ITC eligibility criteria as either inputs, input services, capital goods, or you may want to choose not to avail ITC in certain cases by selecting ineligible ITC. ITC can be availed up to the amount of tax paid against each tax slab. You can enter ITC which is lesser than the paid tax amount, but it cannot exceed the tax paid amount in any case. To claim more ITC, you will need to increase the tax amounts and then claim more ITC if desired. By default, the ITC is made available as inputs and the eligibility is assigned for full tax amount, which you can change as required. However, when the auto-populated invoice has the reverse charge flag, the taxable value and the tax amount declared by you will determine your liability, and you can avail the credit by declaring the ITC eligibility and ITC availed. After reviewing the details of this invoice and ensuring that full ITC is availed, I can go ahead and accept this invoice now. To do that, return to the list of invoices, select the corresponding checkbox, and click the Accept button. The GST portal will display a confirmation message and change the status of invoice to accepted. In case you feel that the supplier has entered an incorrect invoice, you may want to reject it. To do that, just follow the same steps and check the corresponding selection box, then click the Reject button to mark the invoice as rejected, which gets reflected under the status column. If after rejecting an invoice, you change your mind and wish to accept it, you can do that if you have not submitted your GSTR2 yet. The GST portal allows changing the invoice status any number of times till GSTR2 is not submitted. Likewise, in case you want to delay the action on any particular invoice for specific reasons, you can keep that invoice pending in the system for rolling over to the next month's tax period. If the decision is not taken next month also, it will further roll over to next month. Likewise, the rollover may keep happening till the filing of either the September month's GSTR2 or the annual return GSTR9, whichever is earlier. Keeping the invoice pending is simple. Just select the invoice entry and click the pending button. The portal will display a success message indicating that you have put the invoice in a pending state and change the status to pending. Now, let us see how to modify an invoice details. Out of the 4 invoices listed, I'll pick up the last one remaining which is still waiting for an action and click its edit icon. The invoice will open in edit mode where the system will allow you to change its certain fields. The fields such as supplier's GSTIN, supplier's name, invoice number, invoice date, place of supply, supply type, invoice type, and supply attract reverse charge cannot be changed. You can only change the total invoice value and item details such as the figures of tax rates, taxable values, amounts of tax, eligibility for ITC, and the amount of ITC availed. Receiver taxpayers can also increase the tax amounts by editing it here and claim more ITC if they want. In this invoice, let us assume that the supplier has entered the incorrect cess amount and I want to correct it to match with the invoice copy that I received. To do that, simply edit the auto-populated cess amount and update it in the available ITC section too. Once done, click Save. The GST portal will display a confirmation message and change the status to modified. Please note that all modifications to invoice details will be notified to the corresponding supplier and they may or may not approve the changes that you have done. To know more about the effect of modifications and to understand the filing workflow of GSTR 1, 2 and 3, please refer to the GSTR relationship video located under the Help section of GST portal. Now, let us understand the steps of adding details of an invoice that your supplier has missed out in their GSTR 1. To do that, go to the Supplier's Details screen as before and click the Add Missing Invoice Details button. An invoice that was auto-populated cannot be added as missing invoice in GSTR2. If you try to add an invoice number, same as any other auto-populated invoice for the supplier in a financial period, an error indicating duplicate invoice and seeking action on auto-drafted invoice will be displayed. On the next screen, B2B add invoice, enter the supplier's GSTIN, the invoice number, invoice date, and the total invoice value. Notice that the place of supply gets auto-populated based upon the receiver's jurisdiction. However, you can always change it if the supply was made to a different place. Accordingly, GST portal will autofill the supply type for this transaction. Next, select the invoice type from the drop-down. Depending on whether this is a regular B2B supply, exports, or SEZ supply with or without payment. Additionally, if the invoice was raised by a registered taxpayer, you may need to check the reverse charge option as well. In such a case, where the invoice has reverse charge flag, the taxable value and the tax amount declared by you will determine your liability, and you can avail the credit by declaring the ITC eligibility and ITC availed. Lastly, enter the tax and ITC amounts as applicable. Please note that ITC amounts are pre-filled only for auto-drafted invoices. When adding the missing invoices through this option, the ITC does not get auto-populated and the receiver will have to enter the ITC amounts manually. I will go ahead and enter my ITC amounts to avail the eligibility. Once done, click Save. As you can see, the GST portal will display a confirmation message indicating that the invoice has been added successfully. I wish to re-emphasize here that any additions or modifications to GSTR2 gets communicated to corresponding supplier of the affected invoice, and they still have to either accept or reject your changes. Now, if you click the supplier's GSTIN link here and go inside the section uploaded by taxpayer, you will see your newly added entry listed. It is that simple.